I'm fortunate to live in a beautiful place. Like most of us in the United States, I have a safe home, food to eat, and the freedom to live a wonderful life. We enjoy these advantages and privileges of being American because of those few who choose to serve our country. I'm Jeff Rollet, and welcome to When People Lead, where we celebrate leaders who work every day to make the world a better place. Today's leaders left the comfort and security of America to serve their country in faraway places, not through the power of arms, but by providing food and shelter, medical care, and economic assistance. Peace Corps volunteer Renee Alexander and Thomas Rogers of USAID dedicated years of service to America using soft power.
I'm Renee Alexander. I live in San Francisco. I have for 30 years been a freelance journalist and a marketing consultant, but in 2022 I joined the Peace Corps and went to Colombia for 2 years working as a community economic development connector. And I was able to complete a fantastic greenhouse project with the help of USAID. And now that I'm back, I'm figuring out what to do with the skills that I have accumulated over.
Okay, well, my name's Tom Rogers. I come to this after a career in humanitarian assistance and human service over many years, and particularly the last 15 years of it in USAID. And I'm still an advocate for U.S. involvement in humanitarian assistance and assistance in general. This is what soft power is all about.
Why did you choose
Thanks.
this, Tom? And where did you serve over your life?
Yeah, well, I came to after USAID after working in NGOs or non-governmental organizations in Asia and in the Middle East, Central Asia, and the kind of work that I was doing in those non-governmental organizations was very similar to the kind of work that I did in USAID, except in our office in USAID, we were a donor agency. So, I came out of organizations that were receiving support from USAID to do their work into USAID and serving kind of like a grant officer and doing assessments and working with organizations that USAID funded. So I started out in USAID. I guess the first assignment I had was working in Liberia, in Monrovia, Liberia, where I was working in our response to the post-war Liberia. This was in 2003, I guess. Soon after that experience, I went to Iraq, where I was working in the humanitarian response to the displacements and disaster that happened in Iraq during and after the war. And we had all kinds of US and international organization and partners that we were supporting in that work in all humanitarian sectors. And then after Iraq, I worked in Jordan on Syria programs. I worked in Pakistan on Afghanistan issues. I've worked in Southeast Asia, in Indonesia on things that were happening in Aceh there. I worked in Sudan and Darfur during the big Darfur crisis. I worked in Haiti after the big earthquake that occurred in 2005, or is it 2010? I'm sorry, 2010. I went in and out of various places in Southeast Asia and the Middle East. And throughout Africa during my time with OFTA. A lot of my time was spent in East Africa, so in Kenya, in Ethiopia, working on Somalia from Kenya. I worked in West Africa on issues in Nigeria, for instance. And then I worked down in Southern Africa, where we were working on Zimbabwe and the humanitarian crisis in Zimbabwe and Angola. So pretty much all over the world, I kind of ranged.
Everywhere where there was a disaster, there was Tom. Uh, yes. Well,
Kind of
thank you
that
for
way.
that,
Yeah.
first of all. Renee, I've already figured out this is too short a show. And so tell me how you came to join the Peace Corps at that moment in your life, and why that was important to you.
Yeah. Thanks. Well, fortunately for you and our timing, I have a lot shorter experience to relay because I got started pretty late on the Peace Corps thing. Most people join shortly after they finish college or right when they're graduating from college. And I was interested in doing that, but it was just not in the cards for me at that time in my life. It took me about 30 years to get around to actually joining the Peace Corps. And I decided to do it during the pandemic when I had been traveling for a year in South America with my partner when the pandemic started. And so we came back to the US during the pandemic, and I had already I had taken a year off of work, and there was no work to be had. And I just had all sorts of time on my hands. And I thought, you know what? If I'm not going to join the Peace Corps now, when am I going to do it? So I started looking into it. I realized that at that point in time, the Peace Corps had changed some of their rules. It used to be that you applied and then you went wherever they sent you. You didn't really get a lot of choice in where you went, but it's changed. And now you can actually apply for a specific job in a specific country. And there were openings in Colombia for community economic development. And because I had run my own business for many years, doing consulting and marketing and public relations, and community economic development in Colombia really focused on teaching entrepreneurialism to young people and to women. I felt like this was something that I could do well. I already had some Spanish background, so I felt like I had a little bit of a head start there instead of starting with a language I knew nothing about, starting from scratch. So I decided to throw my hat in the ring and got an offer to join the Peace Corps and left in September of 2022 to go live
That's awesome.
in Colombia
We'll
for
get
2 years.
to what you were doing down there for sure. But this is a question that I'm sure you've heard before that everybody seems to ask when these subjects come up. But why did you choose to go to some faraway place to help people when there's so much need for help here at home? So what's your response to that, Renee? And I'll ask Tom the same thing.
That is, you'd think I would have a better answer to that question. But mostly, I think I come from a journalism background in addition to marketing consulting. And so this idea of being embedded somewhere really made a lot of sense to me. I felt like I had some things to offer, but I also felt like there was so much that I could learn from people in other cultures and other places. And going to visit places is not the same as living somewhere and being in a community. And I really had a strong feeling that, just like this this parachuting in idea of just jumping in and hitting the ground running and fixing things right away with our super US skills was not a really good idea. And, I thought it was not good for anyone. And so for me, the Peace Corps seemed to make a lot of sense. I liked the idea that there was, a system in place to find the right place for me to be, to provide the training, to provide the security support that we would need living in a country that um, has had some problems in the past. And so to me, it made more sense to go somewhere where there was a structure in place, where I um, could embed myself in a community and get to know a place and get to know some people, and find out what they really wanted and what they really needed, instead of just going in with our idea of like, oh, I see what this place needs. Um, we should do this. And honestly, I did have ideas when I got to my community about what was needed, and that was really not what was needed in that community. So my ideas changed dramatically once I got to know the community and got to know the people there. And if I had only been there for a year, there's no way
Tom,
that would have happened.
answer the same question? Why go all over the world to solve problems when there's so many problems here?
Yeah, well, in my case, it was kind of a natural progression from doing work in the United States, where I was working in Minnesota in refugee programs. So for resettled refugees in Minnesota, I became very interested in, at that time, this was Southeast Asian refugees from the Vietnam War, pretty much. So I got very engaged in that, very interested in it. And I found out that there was an opportunity to go to work as a UN volunteer in a refugee camp setting in Southeast Asia. So I had never been in the Peace Corps, though a zillion of my friends had. And actually, when the Vietnam War was going on, I was heavily opposed to that, and got very engaged in the anti-war struggle. When I graduated from university in 72, I didn't want to have anything to do with the US government, including the Peace Corps. So I went the different route, and the work that I eventually engaged in it wasn't long-term development. It was relief and humanitarian assistance, which was a different arena that the United States was helping with, a different way of expressing that soft power that you were talking about, Jeff.
How much discretion you were given in the exercise of your jobs? Were you basically tasked to fulfill a program that your bosses have decided for you, or were you allowed some initiative and discretion in the exercise of what you did? I'll start with Tom on that, and then we'll go back to Renee.
Okay. Well, because my work with OFTER, with USAID, for the 15 years that I retired, was in response to humanitarian crises. We were pretty much all about life-saving assistance. So the needs, we would assess the scale and the level of needs, but it was pretty much cut and dried what we were responding to. We were trying to save lives of people whose lives were threatened by those crises. So in all the humanitarian sectors, we were working with our partners to alleviate that suffering and prevent further suffering. So this is in the area of food and nutrition and healthcare and sanitation and shelter, all those really critical needs that all humans
I
have,
applaud that,
regardless of their
because people talk about weapons
circumstances.
of mass destruction, and I'm going, the real weapons of mass destruction are bad water and no food in most of the world. That's where the mass destruction takes place. It's not some bomb from above. Uh,
Yeah.
So Renee, were you given a lot of lead to do what you were doing, and on the flip side of that, were you given support to do what you were doing?
The answer is yes and no. So the with the Peace Corps, so I did have a lot of leeway, um, but there was also some structure and there was some support for things. But in many senses, we were kind of they're like, here are some tools. Try to use them when you get there. And then we found out, you know what, they don't like these tools here. So I'm going to have to come up with something different.
In most locations, when you come to someplace new, it usually takes you at least a year to get the community to accept you and trust you for who you are, instead of what they think you are, or what you think you are in that process. So, um, how much how much does trust play a role in the things you need to do to fulfill your mission, Tom?
We depended a lot upon our local partners that we were supporting with funding, and also with local community leaders to implement the programs that we were doing. And those kinds of things required a certain level of trust to implement together. Um, and because our objectives were fairly straightforward, like delivering food or delivering healthcare or helping people get shelters, temporary shelters, um, people had expectations that we would be doing what we said we'd do for them. So I think they trusted us to do that stuff. But in the long haul, I think it was going to require building a different level of trust for people that were going to be there longer term.
But there still is a big level of, as you mentioned, figuring out what you're doing, what your role is in the community, getting people to understand and accept you for who you are instead of what they expected you to be. Because in general, people thought that I was just a walking bag of money and that I was there to just, throw money around, and that I had all the money in the world, and that I lived in a mansion like the Kardashians. And it took a really, really long time to dispel that myth. There really is a big belief in a lot of countries that everyone in the US is filthy rich, and that we just throw money around. And I guess they have good reasons for believing that, because that's what our media culture teaches. I would say that that is one of the biggest complaints internationally of US support, is that we tend to just come in
Yeah,
and tell them what we think they need to do, and we don't consider the local context, and things don't really work out.
Yeah, I mean, uh, I was just going to say, in response to what Renee was talking about, there were lots of interfaces or cooperation between the Peace Corps and other groups that were doing long-term development assistance with the work that we did in the disaster assistance realm too, in terms of trying to save and restart livelihoods that people had that had been wiped out by conflict or drought or flooding. So all those things, there was a lot of interweaving of this stuff. And that's one of the reasons why it's been so devastating.
there is a bias out there because we are walking bags of money to most of the developing world, um, and so there's there's that bias that we need to overcome. Um, and how do you assess success in that process? At least, Renee, your project is going to have some legs. It's going to continue, at least for now. But the next volunteer could screw it up in that process. Uh, and so I guess I'm wondering. We all do things that we're hoping for the better, and there's always uh, the prospect of failure. So, what is it that motivates you guys to keep going in that process? I'll start with Tom.
What kept me going was seeing the results of our shorter term interventions, our humanitarian programs, and that those were things that were measured in the short term by uh, levels of hunger, levels of malnutrition, malnutrition going down, uh, health indicators like the number of people that had received life-saving vaccinations or TB treatment, or people that had received jobs through job creation programs, those kinds of, there were lots of indicators. Some of them were short term, some of them were longer term. Uh, but it's challenging because in places like Darfur, for instance, you have protracted crises that, I first went there in 2005 when there was a huge crisis going on. And here we are now in 2026, and we have pretty much the same similar crisis going on still
Mhm.
after cycles of this. And, a lot of these places where we worked were conflict zones. So, and instability was kind of built into the whole picture. So uh, you would make some gains and then you would have losses, and you'd make some gains and you'd have losses. And the political
Renee,
instability and the conflict
what did you
really
take away
had a major
from
influence
your
on
Peace
our
Corps, and what
success.
kept you going in that process? Because it was frustrating at the beginning. Yeah.
Yeah, the first year was really, really hard. And I thought, am I going to make it through this 2 years? This is really, really hard. And I, for a long time, felt like I wasn't really making any progress. I thought, am I going to be able to make any difference in this community for anyone at all? And I certainly didn't expect to go in and change an entire community. But I thought, even if just a couple of people decided, oh, I'm going to, start a business because of some of the things I've learned, that would feel like a success. And I would say that after the first year and people realized I was sticking around, I the concepts that I had been trying to impart to the students about entrepreneurialism finally started to take hold. Because what I was finding is that I was working with some students for the second year instead of just the first year, and also my language skills had improved, and also there was a lot more trust. I'll So when we first started talking about this, you mentioned soft power, and I feel like that's a big part of the Peace Corps, and that is one of the things I think a lot of people don't realize, if you haven't traveled a lot. Something I learned in my travels is we believe in the U.S. that everyone all over the world wants to move to the U.S. That the U.S. is the greatest country in the world, and that is where everyone wants to be, and that is why so many people immigrate to the United States. And the reality is, most of the people that I meet in my travels in Central and South America, they really want to stay in their communities. They want to be near their families. They want to live in their own culture. They want to be able to thrive and have families next to the families they already have. And yes, there are people who dream of coming to the US, but many people who come to the US are coming here because they're being driven here by forces such as drought or flooding or natural disasters or man made disasters or conflict. Um, and when I went into the Peace Corps, I felt like a big part of my job was to help people figure out how to thrive exactly where they are so that they don't need to be driven to the US to immigrate. But I really don't want people to be driven out of their communities out of necessity. I don't want people to come to the US and find out it's not the land of, milk and honey. that they thought it was and have to struggle here and currently be treated horribly by our government. So I think that the Peace Corps does a fantastic job of this soft power of helping people see that one, the US, here are people from the US straight out of college who do not have swimming pools and mansions and they're here for 2 years and you're going to learn from them that no, the US is not like that. It's not the land of milk and honey for everyone who goes there. So get that out of your head. And also, here are some skills that I can help you with to help you find a way to thrive in your own community, which is what most people want to do anyway. So I feel like, yes, if the Peace Corps can continue in its mission, and I'm not convinced that it can under the current regime, I'm surprised it's still around, to be perfectly honest. But I want it to continue. And I think that if we want people in the US to step up and do this kind of work, we're going to have to market it a whole heck of a lot better because the Peace Corps has been, relying on other people just knowing about it for a long time. It doesn't have a big marketing budget. Young people don't know about the Peace Corps. And I think that we're going to have to tell them about it if we want them to join. But if that happens, yes, I absolutely believe that the Peace Corps can continue to help people thrive in their own communities.
And Tom, I want to go back to USAID and the issue at hand. What I want to get to is the fact that what did we give up by saving all of these resources that we've been throwing at foreign countries that don't seem to like us anymore?
I think what we gave up is monumental, and it's catastrophic what we gave up in getting rid of USAID, including the office that I worked in. People have been trying since that happened last year to calculate the value of the losses, particularly of lives. And I've seen all kinds of figures, but we're talking about millions of lives that have been lost because USAID is no longer providing those life-saving services. If you look at just the AIDS program, which was part of USAID's portfolio, we took away all those medications that were keeping people alive, HIV meds and stuff in Africa, particularly, hundreds of thousands, probably even millions of lives have been lost since they shut that stuff down. But in response to conflict, it's hard to calculate the lives that have been lost that could have been saved of those people that are victims of conflict, whether it's in Gaza or Darfur or Afghanistan or any of those places that are still active disasters. So, it's very difficult to calculate the loss. I think we found great deal of goodwill amongst the people that we worked with and served in the places that I've worked. And, there we had, you could run into so many families in Darfur who had named one of their kids George Bush back in 2005 because they were so grateful for the assistance that the United States had provided. There's all this hostility towards the United States in those places too, but the work, the service that Americans gave helped to mute that kind of hostility and show people a different side of America that we're not showing them anymore. The Peace Corps, fortunately, is still around and can do that, but its profile is pretty small compared to what USAID writ large was. So very difficult to calculate the loss. And personally, it was devastating for me, even though I had retired already. For all the careers, for people that were dedicated to international service that were cut off completely and wiped out. and those families, it was devastating and still is.
Well, and I would like
I
to
get
add to that.
emotional.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that USAID was like the Peace Corps can do good work, and 2 years is certainly, a nice extended amount of time to be somewhere. But me spending 2 years in a community cannot have a lasting effect and would not have a lasting effect without the support that I had from USAID.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
the fact that we were able to get grants of up to $10,000 from USAID. That's not a huge amount of money, but that was the biggest amount of money we had access to. And the project that I did in my community was we got $7,000 from USAID. And the USAID funding is what makes Peace Corps work sustainable, because I'm there for 2 years, but that greenhouse that we built is going to be there for, hopefully that will continue to be there for generations. Hopefully they will continue repairing it and maintaining it. And if it weren't for USAID, then I would be gone and poof, it's been a year since I've been back. And, I would be forgotten. And the students I worked with have gone on and graduated, and it really wouldn't be sustainable. So I'm so devastated and heartbroken that this has gone. And that's only from the Peace Corps side of things. And USAID did so much more than just make our work sustainable.
yeah. Another thing that I'd like to offer, Jeff, is that we
Sure.
worked over the years a lot on the disaster side with the U.S. military. Really front and center right now, obviously, with what's going on. But we developed all kinds of relationships within the U.S. military and all the branches, and got military officers in particular interested and engaged in humanitarian issues, and trained them and worked with them a lot. And all of that is now to the wayside as well. So there's just all kinds of repercussions to these cuts and this craziness that people will not even be aware of. Many people don't care, unfortunately.
They don't care because they don't know. And that's one of the things that's been left out of the situation. The final thought for me is we are blessed with a lot of advantage and privilege in the United States. And coming with that advantage and privilege is a responsibility to share it. And the people we talk to invariably are more interested in sharing their advantage and their privilege, and more interested in helping others than seeing how they can get the nicer car next week or get the bigger house next year. I am deeply honored for the people that I talk to, including the people here today, to share their stories and to share how we can continue to make this a better world through their efforts and every day-to-day conversation that we can do to improve the situation that we see. 65 years ago, in his inaugural address, President John F. Kennedy challenged Americans to ask what we can do for our country. That challenge still stands today, and the Peace Corps still plays a vital role internationally by applying soft power. To learn more, go to www.peacecorps.gov. Our thanks go out to Tom and Renee for answering the call and their service to America. Production and editing services provided by Dudley Peacock of The Wave Podcasting and Pat Honstang. I'm Jeff Rollet. Are you a leader in your community? Or do you know a leader making the world a little bit better each day? We want to hear from you. Let us know by contacting us at whenpeoplelead.com. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to subscribe to When People Lead wherever you get your podcasts. Like us, tell your friends, find the leader within.